Boys and girls, Alex here. This is version 3 of what I call another maze box puzzle. This is just going to be a big quick intro preamble as to the functions and the features of the box before I go into the creating of the box. I haven't locked the box per se, and the main reason is it's not a simple puzzle. And I don't want to sit here for hours trying to solve it in front of you, wasting footage. So they've both been disassembled, This is how it works. It works on this principle of a maze, which I'll show you here. And you've got this pin that is controlled by these sliders. The sideways movement is controlled by the sliders. But if you have a look, once you move that slider that way, independently of course, and that way, then the whole lid has to move uniformly up or down. Then you move the sliders individually, and then they have to move up or down. Look, I'll put this back to where it was so I can then further demonstrate. That's how it is. Now actually the way when the box is assembled, or actually should put it together the right way, the sides and the back differ only because naturally the back has to allow for the slots for these pins to come out of, like that. Now to actually permit, as you can see the sides come all the way up, to permit the slides to move, you have to rotate the side. Now you'll find that the pivot for the rotation is off center, so now it exposes these layers. There's actually 3 layers of 3mm MDF there, which I'll go into in a second. And that will now, whoops, I rotated the wrong one, as again, well, that's the right one, but for demo purposes, once you rotate it, you can then move the slider. And naturally, you've got to rotate the one on the other side to be able to move the slider the other way. Now let's take off. You see, now the problem with it is, okay, we'll get into this one now. I've actually taken the lid off. As you can see, the lid consists of 3 layers, the sliders plus this bottom layer, which permits or restricts the lateral movement of the pin sideways, and that's its range. And that range is governed by how far you can move that pin to the right or the left here and right there, and that sort of is a governing factor of that. And same thing with this. You'll notice that this pin has a smaller distance to range of travel, as in sideways. Now the box itself, the lid comes off separate, the maze, and this is now an interchangeable maze. But you'll find that there's these locking devices that will lock around these dowels to hold the maze in place. So what you do is you bring these little pins up, lock the maze, hang on, we'll just do it this way, lock the maze, and then eventually, whoops, we'll do it the other way. It's locked in. Then you'll eventually maneuver these pins, the sliders, to negotiate the maze, and naturally because the maze being locked in, you can't remove the lid. The problem I made with version 2 was this thing came down too far. Came down 3mm, well actually 2mm too far, because what it should do is captivate this bottom layer so it can't, the whole lid can't move backwards and forwards. You'll find that with that not being captivated, like if I had another 3mm there on top of that, the slider could move over that bit, but the actual lid couldn't. But now I can move the lid, which means that I can get at these little levers, and if I do it this way, I can undo them. Now personally, you could say that that's a feature, so people can actually undo the box without physically solving the puzzle. The only thing is they have to ensure that they keep the lid or the maze against the box while solving it. My next version is to change this offset rotation by 2mm to bring it up so there'll be a 2mm overlap. I've allowed 2mm, although it's a 3mm thing, I've allowed that extra mil for that extra play, a 1mm extra clearance of that thing, and I'm hoping the 2mm will be sufficient to captivate that bottom layer, because that's always static, so it can't move sideways and it's got to stay there. That is the intention, and that has been really the main concept of version 3. So let's put this aside. In the meantime, while I've been making these puzzles, version 1 and 2, I've developed the swag of Jigs to assist me. Again, I'll mention it later of how these jigs work. Like this particular jig is specifically designed to center that button on the slider, and again I'll mention why and where and how they use them, but they are mainly designed to align or center align bits of, sorry, I didn't realise when I was talking about this, for centering that button on that cross piece. There's another part to this jig that goes under, but, and again, because if you have a look at the slider, you'll notice that the top piece is much narrower than the bottom piece, and it has to be centered. Like in the past I used to use spacers, like I'd put a 3mm spacer there, push that up, but sometimes that wasn't 3mm, because MDF can range from about 2.8 to 3.2 depending on what production line it comes off. And anyway, by the use of this jig, I can ensure it is centered within 0.1 of a mil, because or 0.15, which is the curve of the laser. Now, what happened was with version 1, so that's why what happened with version 2. Version 1, hang on. With version 1, I made the floor that I didn't take into consideration. Where the hell is it? Didn't take into consideration where this was. When you considered the thickness of the side, and if it's flush against there, you'll notice that it actually overlaps where this is supposed to travel, which effectively, and again bear in mind we're looking at upside down now, like this, which basically meant, this is upside down, which basically meant the side had to, if you flushed the side against that retaining knob, you'll see how it overlapped. So naturally, if the side was flush, that retainer knob couldn't move. Now, for the sake of the first version, I actually made it work by cutting that there flush. The other side was okay. Cutting that flush and having flush with the dowel, having 3 sides of the circle, or 3 edges of the circle, was sufficient to hold the lid on. But so that's why that had to be redesigned, and you might just notice if you compare the thickness of that, not so much the thickness, but how far that slot is down compared to there. You'll notice it was just a minor redesign, and it was only done on about the top 2 cross pieces. But anyway, that's beside the point. Okay, so what we have now is, let's go over to the other table. Whew, that was a lot of bullshit, wasn't it? We're over here at the other table where I have naturally engraved and 1 layer body filled. I haven't done the 2nd layer yet of the pattern. One of the things I have changed this time is I used to just cut the pattern out and body fill. Naturally I had to then sand it. But what I've now done is sacrificed about 10mm perimeter around it, which is, let's face it, I waste more MDF than sort of 20mm around the perimeter, 10mm either side. Because when I sand it, it stops the, well, basically not so much the 6mm piece, which is this, but it's more so for the 3mm, whereby when I go off over the edge, the weight of the sander tends to round off the corner just a fraction. By having this perimeter around, if there is any dropping of the sander and rounding it off, it's on the perimeter and not on this. Also, I've done the same thing with, I've done the same thing with all of them. And not only that, this perimeter will permit me to then get a backing board and hold the pieces in place so I can then buff them in one go rather than buff them individually, which I used to do. I won't do it with that way. Again, with the buffing, I've already done a lot of buffing before, but I will show you how I do buff one of these pieces once I've done it. The next thing to do is, and I'll do it on this one, but I won't do it for all of them, is naturally sand to get rid of the first layer, because it's only a rough layer of Timbermate wood filler. I use the ebony, of course, and there's still a lot of parts I might have missed and all that, and rather than go absolutely stupid and give it a really thick layer, I've given it a relatively thin layer, so it will require another layer, but the next layer will be just a skim coat. So okay, back to the other table to do some sanding. I usually sand to 240, 180 at worst, but this time, because of the perimeter and the rough nature, I'm going to go try 150 and not go down as deep, but get aggressive enough. Yeah, that'll give you a better idea of the pattern I've chosen for this one. How are we? Again, you know, it's all druthers. I happen to like this. Now this is going to get a skin coat, and when I say a skin coat, you'll see what I mean. I am going to be quite spongy. Oh God. With the filler, dollop in the middle, get out the larger spatula, probably could have used a bit more moisture in it. However, the one good thing about this Timbermate is once you start working it, it seems to soften up. Well, not seems to, it does. You can see I started off as hard to move. Again, I'm probably being more generous than I need to, but because all I have to do is just now fill in the surface areas that I missed with the first layer. And I really seem to get, as you can see, that $1 has actually gone a long way. It's gone further than I thought it would. Just make sure I cover everything up. And again, if I don't go too thick, less moisture to potentially warp the MDF. Beautiful stuff, this. I won't close the lid. No, I wipe these things off because they do start to, hang on, get a tissue. They do start to harden quickly and it sticks well. Alright, look, I'm going to now virtually do the same on the smaller pieces and then come back with, probably I'll sand this for the final coat. Or with the final coat. Off the final coat. Ah, you know what I mean, I hope. For those that haven't seen me buffing up these pieces, here's a piece that I actually buggered up. It works okay, but I didn't engrave it properly, so it's now a reject, but still it's a perfect piece I can use to demonstrate the buffing technique. I use the Beal buffing system only because I love their buffs. They're great quality buffs. They come in, I think they're 8 inches. There's 3 grades that I use: tripoli, and white diamond and wax. To do it, I load up the buffer with some tripoli compound and then just simply hold it against it. You can see how, well, we'll see if you can see. Here we are. You can see how it changed colour and there is already quite a nice little sheen to it. So it's just a matter of working the piece around until all sides are covered. Now, I will admit, I might put this on. I'll put my Trend helmet on. Hey, here we are. I don't know whether this is toxic or not, but it stinks like hell, especially this. So I put this on just to keep it dry. Now, over to the white diamond. Hang on, which is this one here. Zip out. Again, a quick charge of the white diamond, which is this stuff. And again, the same process. They both have cutting abrasives in them, so they are sort of like sanding to a very fine grit. There you have it. Now I haven't got this slow speed grinder. It runs at about half the speed that I use for larger pieces. For smaller pieces I actually use my lathe, same system. Here we are at another location about to work on the end pieces. What I've done is I've, for these pieces, the 10mm magnet, 10mm diameter, 12mm thick magnet are just ideal to fit in there and is perfect for the size. However, in the 6mm, I didn't want to drill right through. Otherwise, you know, there'd be no real support for the magnet. So what I've done is I've engraved 3 times. Oh, come on, hang on, I'm trying to keep the thing there. I've engraved 3 times, but it certainly hasn't gone down far enough. Actually what I did was I engraved in this one previously, but I buggered up. I must have moved the wood because after I over engraved it skewed the hole or whatever, so these are hopeless. Well, look, fortunately on the laser it was just a quick case of cutting 2 more pieces, rebuffing them, which was the hardest part, and these can be tossed out or put aside as a bad example. However, these holes aren't deep enough, so what I do is I actually just manually, oh hang on, here's another magnet. God, I've got to watch these magnets because they snap together. They're strong and they snap together and they have a tendency to break. But what I will do is I'll just dig out this hole a bit. Look, I could have probably done this on the drill press, but I'm not confident of getting the right depth. And the other problem is Forstner bits will have that little spindle which will come out the other side, so I've got to use a twist drill bit and I don't have the best control over them. So it's a case of just trying, fitting, removing carefully, and just keep drilling away until I get a fairly level surface. Basically put the magnet in, pull these others away. No, still not good enough. Bit more. And then I'll eventually super glue them in here. Okay, here we go, and this will give you an idea of how this is supposed to work. There'll be naturally a magnet in here. Bear in mind that this is going to have another cover over it. So, let's just say we've got the magnet there. A spare magnet will go in here. Then the cover will come over that, and hang on, I'll just try and simulate the circumstance. So you've got your dowel through there. Then what you do is you flip those around, releases a magnet, then it comes to the other side and that magnet catches. And you can then flip it back the other way. Anyway, that's the theory behind it, and I won't waste any more time on this part. As a quick diversion to people that might have followed my mini workbench build, these little dogs you can get, aluminium dogs, they're primarily designed to use on the path system so that when you have to relocate the jig, so you can then drill another hole in there. Well, you can't put the pin down there, so these little things come along where you can drop it in the hole and use the pin to locate it. Well, I've also found a handy use for these is just to plug up the holes so that things don't fall through your dog holes. The problem is they're not cheap. They're about $10 each, I think, or they come $30 for 3 of them. That's Australian dollars. So what I've done is I've actually made these plugs using this plug cutter. Now look, you can make your 20mm dowels, although it's hard. Well, you can't buy the bloody things. You can make it, but I just have trouble getting consistency. Yet these plugs are brilliant, you know, they're dead smooth, and look at that. They fit in there. Now look, they're not super tight, far from it, but there you are. It's flat with the surface and nothing will fall through from that. And, you know, hey, some of them are loose, okay, that's loose, but even then, it's still going to, alright, put just a dollop of tape on one side to hold it in there. But the beauty of it is, it'll stop things from falling down into the hole. Anyway, that's my little piece of diversion. Well, not uru, but see you later on.